I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. So I'm feeling a little conflicted. The sacral in me loves to respond to things, so I get very activated by people asking questions or people making comments that make me think of something else, you know? It makes me really want to talk, which I think has a lot to do with what wait to respond is about for sacral people.
I really get activated by questions too. Like whenever you ask me a question that's like genuine, like, hey, what is, I'm always like, okay, how much time do you have? Because I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Or even when a kid asks me a question, I'm like, are you ready for this? I'm about to offload as much as I know.
Well, so then I guess, is that just an invitation? It's also just, it's not even if it's directed at me. I notice like I won't have an idea for a TikTok, but then I watch TikTok and I get like activated, like I want to jump in conversations that are happening. I don't. But then when someone says it to me, I'm like, oh, fuck. So I wonder if I have some like projected channels. I learned that recently, that if you have projected channels or even like gates or whatever, that also gives you some of that waiting for the invitation kind of flavor, which is interesting. But, so there's several kind of topics that we've discussed and then people have commented on, and some really like activating comments that I want to like get into. But we've been waiting because this Neptune in Aries definitely has given me more energy. Definitely has gotten rid of that thing I was talking about where we all just felt trapped in a goo. But it's also, I'm so irritable or like, yeah, I guess that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, easily triggered, kind of. That's what I've been feeling. I'm like, things that normally don't bother me or I can traverse, I can realize like, oh, this is just, I'm projecting and I can move through it. There's just like no space for it. I quickly am like fired up about something. And then I loop and like focus on it way longer than I should. And then before I know it, my energy, I'm like low vibe.
Yeah.
And it's tough to get up out.
So it's probably just going to take us a while to navigate this. I mean, I think we said the exact same thing on Neptune and aggro, but here to report has not gotten better. And I'm a little bit nervous because Saturn is headed towards Aries as well. I think we have a couple weeks left. And yeah. Like, so I'm worried about discussing something that I actually feel kind of like open-handed and like curious about, but I just am so quick to anger or like intensity, I guess I want to say, that's not even necessarily intense. Angry. Like we keep having things that are so dumb that we're like, are we mad? What's happening?
Are we arguing?
Yeah, so what it's like for people out in the world that don't realize that the energetic weather changes every so often. I mean,
you can see it in the collective, like just viewing, going on to X at any given moment. It's like, oh my God, the chaos and the anger that everyone is like dealing with. I mean, there's fights everywhere. There's like little mundane interactions that are just somebody like kind of yelling or arguing that turns into like a knife fight so quickly. The vitriol on like comments and people, tearing people down. You can feel it. It's intense energy hitting everyone. But yeah, being conscious of it is helpful because then you can realize like, wait, okay, this isn't totally just a personal thing. There's a lot of energy coming in and then learning how to navigate it individually, I think is helpful instead of just taking it out when you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off and next thing you know, you're pulling over in a gunfight,
Yeah. And it's funny because it is innovative energy and I'm already seeing so much innovation being presented. Like I'm seeing less and less people talking about the problem and more people talking about, oh, here's something we could do. Here's a way to subvert authority, whatever. Love that. It is funny. People have been fighting on the internet for years now, but the flavor of the fight has shifted quite a bit. Like if you go back to like 2020 era, there was so much Capricorn energy around that time. We had Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn. I think the nodes were in Capricorn, Cancer. And the fights then were very Capricornian in that it was like all about getting the details right. And there was a lot of like arguments over semantics. And then when there's a lot of Pisces energy, so we just had Neptune and Saturn and Pisces and the nodes in shifting into Pisces, I guess. There was a lot more like victim Olympics because that's very like Piscean kind of way of fighting is just like who's the chief victim in the house, And so now Aries, it's the child. And so I think I've seen a lot more like childish insults that aren't even bothering, we're seeing words that we haven't been using for a while coming back. We're seeing like, I say we as like the big collective, just flinging insults and running, just like a hit and run, not even trying to prove your point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's Mars energy, it's war energy. The war is definitely boiling up all over the world. And I am hopeful for Uranus and Gemini to show up to this party. And then in 2026, all three of these energies being together to kind of change the paradigm. So we at least get to look at a different flavor of chaos, Anyway, so there's a few different things. I'm like also keenly aware that I breathe like I just ran a marathon. We had a few different comments on the vegan conversation. I thought it would be interesting to revisit. And if it gets intense, just know it's not an accurate representation of my feelings. I guess I'm not going to read the actual comments, but there was a couple different like lines of thought that were very activating for me to think about and talk about that I'd like to get into. One thing I would like to say is when we were talking about you shifting to not eating meat, I think you were sharing or eating meat again, eating red meat. You were talking about some things that made sense to you in that process. And I think one thing that's very tricky in these conversations, while we are all still so conditioned that we all have to be on the same page and we all have to be coming from the perspective, and there is one absolute truth, that when you and I are talking on this podcast, we are doing our best to operate outside of that conditioning. And we like logically don't resonate with the conditioning that what's right for you and me is right for everyone. But we do still have the conditioning of bias that we're like working through or whatever. But in that conversation specifically, you know, we were talking about what works for us and like what makes sense for us. And you are someone who likes to really have like a logical mental framework for the decisions that you make. Maybe I'm like that too. I don't know. Maybe we're all like that. But for you, it was just like, I felt better when I started eating it. But then you shared the thing about animals eating like plants eating minerals, minerals eating
each other.
Yeah. And all the way up. And then I think that kind of opened a can of worms in the world of people deciding what is the quote unquote right diet. You have like carnivores have like their propaganda and vegans have their propaganda. And the way that they handle that is to sling each other's propaganda, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not true because it's propaganda, but it's just narrative. And that's very much like what we're coming out of is we all have to be on the same page, and whoever has the best narrative gets to decide what everyone does. And like, so we have that conditioning. And that wasn't the intention, I don't think, with you sharing that. You were just saying that was something that made sense to you and made you...
Yeah, it was like my personal experience.
Right.
That's not going to be true for everybody. But if we're all aligning to like whatever our personal experience is as primary, instead of taking what other people say and taking that as like, oh, well, that doesn't resonate with me, but I feel that's true, so I need to do that, is where I think we can get kind of caught up. I think it's good to experiment with it, like I did with the pork thing. I was like, oh, I heard an interesting perspective on that. Let me try that, you know. So I think it's always like worth trying, but then basing like whatever your experience is should be the more dominant thing.
Right. And I guess that's what you said was like, it felt better to me. And then I heard this presented in a different way that made it make sense.
Yeah.
And I guess we're all like that. I'm like that too. So it's sometimes when what feels right for us doesn't line up with like the whatever the preconceived mental notion that we have, it can be helpful to hear someone present it. And so it was kind of like you were hung up on this kind of moral thing, but then having it explained wherever you read that about the plants eating the minerals and the you know, whatever. So
that wasn't even I heard that. I just deduced that, really. It's like logical thinking. When you just think about it, you're like, oh. I think so much of this is like, I so many times in my life, I think I know everything about some specific thing. And because I'm constantly seeking and looking for other information, I'll learn something and then go, oh, I didn't know enough actually when I made that such a sure decision on veganism is the only way. Now I learned more, and then I was like, oh, I just didn't know enough. So now my categories of reason have expanded and my awareness is expanded. Let me now try these things. And I feel like that's just true with everything. Like we're always like that. And that's when we get caught in like one way of thinking, it does create stagnation. And until we begin to learn to grow and like take in other information that may be contrary to what we have been stuck on for so long, then you realize like, oh, I just didn't have the whole scope there. So now I'm going to readjust and widen my scope, and my actions are going to follow that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's true with a lot of things. The things that are really controversial, it's a little more difficult, you know, like eating, you know, veganism and what is the right way. It's like there is so much biohacking and health knowledge out there right now that all in all, I think it's really great because we have a lot of different people experiencing and learning things that are helpful. But if it doesn't resonate, then it's just like not the time to necessarily adjust. But I think I'm always too, when I get triggered by something, like it's in the moment, it's hard. I want to like double down on my perspective. But after it sits for a while, then I'm kind of like, oh, it's let me go consider this now, because that's what we're doing, is expanding and learning more about what we're doing here, you know?
Right. And in my experience, it's like I would be vegan for a while because of this reason. And then I would realize something that makes me realize that's not what's right for me. And then I would go be carnivorous for a while on that train of thought. But then I find another piece of information that's like, actually, it should be both, you know? And then I do that for a while. And then it's like, actually, you don't need either, you know? And that's just I just assume I'm not always going to eat meat. I just assume it's always felt true to me that there will come a point where we've just like left that portion of the like consciousness experience. To me, it has more to do with not needing to eat. You know, we just start to take in energy differently. I don't think that, well, everything that I was shown is that like the like consumption, digestion kind of way that we do things is an allegory of how mechanical and kind of like overly material our reality is. It's very inefficient if you think about it. Like the amount of times that you need to eat to keep the body running. If you think about like technology, if technology was actually advancing without planned obsolescence, you would create something that could run for a long time, right? That doesn't need to be constantly like fed and then constantly, and you know, I get the whole like ecosystem and the poop creates nutrients for the other thing, but it is just like one way of being, and it is hyper physical,
That's what's helped me a lot, like in learning the more macro parts of the reality, that there are these other densities of experience. And then even in the concept that like the physical world is, you know, from a certain perspective, an illusion. It's kind of it's a game. While we're in it, and we've been conditioned to think strictly like linearly 3D, there's a million different arguments and narratives you can get in when you're just like 3D thinking. And so that's where like all the morals exist, and this is the right way, this is the wrong way. When I get into like more of that macro thinking, trying to understand this fourth density reality, which is like just outside of the physical linear game, all the like 3D thinking changes. It's just kind of like options. There's no good or bad. It's just like whatever thing seems to resonate and make sense. But like, I don't know, from that macro perspective, it's easier to go like to make decisions in a little bit more of a nuanced way. Like if it's a virtual game, it takes the seriousness out of life and death, kind of. It takes the seriousness out of making the wrong decision. It's just a lesson, you know, making the right decision. They're all just like lessons. And so to me, that is where I'm like always trying to get to when I'm caught up on something, is like, let me zoom out a little bit. And what is the point of this? What's useful here? And so I think it's a lot of the times it's like arguments are taking, especially in people that are spiritual and trying to like elevate their frequency, we get caught up in arguments that are strictly 3D thinking. They're like just linear thinking. And there's just a million different ways to go with that, and a waste of time kind of arguing on that level. If you're trying to elevate and get up out of it, trying to think in a more of a fourth density thinking, I think is very fruitful. It has been for me, but it's very complex too, because we're in the 3D body, we're in physicality. And so it's hard, but I found myself just getting exhausted by trying to think linearly, because there are just so many different ways to go about it. But in that fourth density aspect, like just the concept that when you're viewing like a plasmic thing or some kind of cryptid or some ghost or something, that it's the way you experience it and see it is based on your conscious projection of that energy. And so it is created via what your consciousness perceives of it. Just that concept in general is like, that's very hard to feel into and control, because like if I immediately see an energy that's foreign, that's a fourth density thing, whatever my state of consciousness is going to present as that.
Right.
So that, like, trying to be in that state, realizing this whole reality is like that, you know, whatever your state of mind is like kind of dictating the experience. So why get caught up in the like little details? Try to like, you know, pull back a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like, it's a very hard thing to like think out of linear time, out of physicality, because we're in the damn thing. But that idea is always like with the UFO stuff and all these cryptids, and everybody's like swearing that it's this one thing. When you understand it's a connection to your consciousness, it's anything.
Right.
It's based on you and what you project onto the experience. That's like so wild to me. That proves that it's virtual, and that proves that the most important thing is like your state of consciousness, what you focus on, can you focus your mind purely on one thing without getting distracted by something else, by a fear or by a judgment or anything. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I think that learning that reality loads according to your preconceived notions, you know, learning that and like, I don't want to say perfecting that, but learning how to engage with that, you can really start to create worlds. But there's so much programming and conditioning in us to load things that suck, to load things that aren't to our benefit. We get like swept up in wanting to prove the shittiest timeline. I do this as well to people, that you'll start to like load that reality because that's what you're looking for. And reality is literally just that. There's not like objective things in there, but you're also impacted by all the other people that you're around or that you're taking in or whatever. Like their influence is also loading. And if we really like truly understood those mechanics of the simulation, basically, that we live in, we would live in a completely different reality right now. But we are just barely waking up to that stuff, and we still don't really understand it. I would argue that even the things that we're experiencing in the physical are just reflections of our own projections. That's why you can put 10 people in the same room for the exact same event. You're going to get 10 different stories,
right?
Especially if you separate them right away and don't let their perceptions influence each other. And that's because we literally, even though it seems like we're sharing the same physical space, we are not in the same physical projections. And those biases that, you know, we talk about all the time that we all have, they impact that like simulation that we are engaging with. And so a lot of times when we're arguing over the semantics, it is just like, I'm just telling you what's happening in my simulation, and it can either validate, you know, especially right now, because sometimes I go, what's the point of talking?
Yeah.
Like, if I really believe that my perception, interesting, this is fucking up my throat chakra right now. If I really believe that my perception is just for me, and I don't think that anyone else should internalize it if they don't want to, and that they're living in their own realities, like, why am I even talking into microphones about my perception? And I get stuck in that sometimes, and I don't want to talk. And I believe that taking in each other's perceptions, especially right now when we're in this window of time where there's so much conditioning to release, can be empowering if it's to the right person.
Right. I feel like this kind of gets us into the next thing we're talking about too, is like a lot of that is hierarchical conditioning, where it's like there's a right way and a wrong way, and I'm on the right side. I've made all these adjustments and it's helping, so now everybody else needs to do it. Or on the flip side of somebody that is like kind of lost and looking for help and finds a good source that like is a lot of resonant truths to them, then you start to everything that they say is something that is true and you need to adjust to, and not, forgetting that there's like some of these things are going to be true for me, some of them are not. That doesn't mean all the person's thoughts are correct or they're all wrong now if something's out of resonance. It's like, it's very easy. I mean, I do it too. Like when I'm in a deep rabbit hole, like with the Cassiopean stuff, there's times where I've been like so obsessed with looking at the transcripts and everything that they say. I'm like, okay, that's the ultimate truth. Like, this is the source. I need to go to this for everything. And you get caught in little traps where I'm like, I'll take on something and I'm like, I don't know if that's actually real. Like, I don't know if that's true for me. So this automatic kind of habit to draw a hierarchy when we're even searching for truths, new truths, or people that are really good they've had a lot of experience and they have a lot of good information to share, we like pedestalize them really quickly and create kind of like a very rigid orientation. I think that's conditioning that's very deep for everyone because the reality has been hierarchical for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a email from someone who was like, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, did Mark just say that humans are above animals? And I guess it was that same conversation about the minerals and the plants and the animals and I don't even think about that. It makes sense when you say it. It's not something that I think about. I know it's something that is discussed in like Eastern religions as far as when we reincarnate, are we reincarnating linearly? Like, are we going from mineral to plant to animal to human? Or are we just bouncing around? And a lot of this stuff at this point, to be honest, I feel like we don't yet have enough of the categories of reason to understand the mechanics of any of this, because we are still engaging with this stuff from linear time. Mm-hmm. And what I have just learned over the last 5 years even is that we are existing in all these lifetimes at once. And the linearity is something we superimpose onto it later. Just like when I died and talked to the blue ball of light, it wasn't words. I just immediately knew this thing. It didn't happen in a linear fashion. And when I woke up, I actually felt the sensation of my brain transcribing that experience into linear words. Like, I remember being like, what the fuck was that? And I didn't have any categories of reason for that. So as I was explaining it to people, I was like, no, but they said it, but they didn't say it. I was in the light, but I was my own thing, but you couldn't see me because I was in the light. Like, it was so many things that you can't, just like you were just saying, like, you can't describe in physical, linear, whatever, you know? And so then we put these clunky ass fucking material, physical, like, interpretations of things that can't be interpreted in the material reality. And then we put our weirdo conditioning in it as well. And I think that the question is a hierarchical question that, and I get shit sometimes for saying hierarchy doesn't exist. Hierarchy is not universal law in the way that we interpret it here as colonized fucking people in the cross of planning in the West. Like, it doesn't exist in the universe. Differentiation exists.
Yeah, and I like the way that like the C's talk about this is like the densities, like they differentiate densities and dimensions. Dimensions are lateral, so that's like what you were saying is like all of our lifetimes exist in the present moment, and you can alternate dimensions, which is similar to like jumping a timeline. you jump into a different version. You make 5 choices today that are different than what you normally would make. You're on a different timeline, but that other version of you is still like going, the energy's going somewhere, and you can fall back into that timeline. So those are all dimensions. And those, there is no hierarchy. That's just like lateral dimensions. And densities, if not thought about carefully on outside of time and linear, you would think they're hierarchical, like being in 4th density is better than being in 3rd density. But it isn't. It's a measurement of awareness that is measured by how close it is to the oneness. And so when like a 2D animal only has so much awareness that it can't really conceive what a human is doing when they are doing their taxes, or like they leave to go to the grocery store and come back. They just know like the human that's around left, and they're gone right now. That's it. And they can't conceive all these other things that humans can conceive. So that isn't better or worse. It's just like more awareness. Yeah. And the higher you go, like it is hard when you're in 1 density to conceive the perspective of a being that's on a 4th density with just more awareness.
Yeah.
And they can see that this is an illusion, and they can move through walls because of that, because they're not anchored to linear thinking anymore. And so that isn't better or worse. But if you're in 3rd density and you're stuck here, it's like you do conceive like, well, it's better to be there. You know, they have more power, but it's not really like that. It's the same thing like when you're an adult and you take your kid, like toddler, to a sandbox with a bunch of other kids, and they're like in the perimeter of the sandbox and they're playing in there, and you can see like the little games that they're playing. They're focused so much on that me standing outside the sandbox can, you know, see a dog coming running or something and prevent something from, and they're not even aware of it, because I have more experience and more awareness of the dangers of the reality, but they can't conceive that yet. And so do you have power over the little kids? Yeah, you do. And what you want to do with that is then you get into some kind of like moral thing, but it's not really weighted in the moral way we think. I think it's just, what do you want to do with that power? What do you want to do with that awareness? And that's when I think you get into this like division of service to self-oriented people or service to others-oriented. The service to other-oriented, if a parent is sitting there with the kids, is going to be looking for any dangers that come and, you know, protect the child. A service to self-oriented is going to go, how can I take advantage of these little kids?
Yeah, or how am I being seen? Is everyone here seeing me as a good parent?
Yeah.
You know, it's all about you.
Super subtle STS stuff too, yeah.
So when I think about higher consciousness, I think about, like, imagine a drone on the ground out there in the yard. And while it's sitting on the ground, that camera can only perceive what that camera is facing. So it's like the grass. And that's the whole world to that drone. If that drone lived its entire life sitting on the ground, its whole life is a grass. I think of that as lower consciousness. That doesn't mean worse. It means more limited. And then the drone comes up about a foot off the ground, and now suddenly the yard starts to come into focus, and it understands more than the 10 blades of grass it was able to see. And now it has increased awareness, increased consciousness. It is aware of more of its environment. Now it goes 10 feet off the ground, and the yard, so like the entirety of the yard as part of a thing, starts to make sense. And you keep zooming up until the thing is hovering above where it can see the entire town. Let's say a drone could go that, a little drone could go that high, and now it's up and it's looking at the entire planet, and it has this entire concept, right? It goes higher. It's looking at the entire solar system or whatever. That is when I'm thinking of higher consciousness. When I'm thinking of someone who's conscious versus not conscious, going all the way back to soberish metaphors, it's when you're playing a first-person shooter video game and all you can see is outside your eyes, you're really only engaging with your own projections. You're engaging with your own perspective. You can't see what's happening behind you. You can't see what's happening, down the street. You can't see the context of the person you're engaging with, you can't see the entirety of their life experience, so you understand what you're engaging with. You're limited to that first-person shooter, where someone playing an RPG game is actually looking from way above and has all of the context. So higher consciousness means more context, more awareness.
It's like wider. I always like the term wider.
Wider. It does not mean, higher means literally like if you left the ground, you would have more of a bird's eye view. And none of that, it's a different game. It's not a superior game. However, the more awareness you have within the context of the game, the more agency you're going to have, the more control is available to you. A lot of people don't take it,
That's why the core thing of the C's is like knowledge is everything. Knowledge protects knowledge. Because if you can see wider in the game, you can see what's going on, where the manipulation is. Therefore, you can choose to not be in it.
Right.
And so you have more tools, more awareness to be able to understand subtle division and stuff, not take it seriously anymore, or the moral thing that you've been led to believe is like the right way. Now you can see it's like, oh, it's just a choice. It's not actually better. And in fact, most of the stuff that is led to believe that this is the right thing and is so strictly you can't go outside of that is probably a manipulation to get you to go into a place where you think you're doing good, but you're actually getting your power taken away. And that's what like higher, wider awareness gives you, that is powerful and useful, but it is not necessarily better,
Yeah, and it's also like a recycling loop. So where it's if I'm a human, now a lot of Eastern religions believe that you reincarnate in order. I don't have a take on that, I guess. I don't. What makes sense to me is that once I have been a human in this round, because I believe you recycle back into it, but because it's infinite, it never fucking ends, which also makes these conversations kind of stupid. But let's say I come to the earthly realm to experience what the earthly realm has to offer. Being a rock, where you literally just sit there and just exist as the program of a rock for however long, is going to be less stimulating once I've already been a human with all this agency, with all this complexity of experience. That, not to say cows or pigs are not majestic and awesome or whatever. This is not the conversation. This is a moral thing that creeps in, where people's like morality makes it difficult to understand consciousness, which exists outside of morality. Imagine we're just like aliens who are like, I'm going to put on this VR mask and experience the human experience, or the rock experience, or the fish experience, or the pig experience. When you go to how many different things can I experience as a human versus how many different experiences can I have as a pig, yes, the pig may have like the ability to feel feelings and it might be more in balance with nature or whatever. That doesn't change the fact that when you're coming from an experiential perspective, it's more limited, just like it's more limited than a human, just like if you choose to come as a plant, you're having a more limited experience than the pig.
And doesn't mean that's not beautiful and amazing. Just like it is when you first kind of start to wake up to conspiracy theories or things that you thought were good and now you see that they're like maybe bad. There is a desire. I remember when that first started happening to me. I had a strong desire to go back to sleep because the naivety actually allowed me to kind of have more peace, and just exist within the thing and not like see the holes in everything. And so there's like, to the lower density animals, or the more limited beings, there's profound beauty in it. And there's stuff that like it's connected and operating on an automatic system that is like actually much more harmonious than the complications of the humans with feelings and like free will and all this stuff that complicates it. And it when we compare ourselves to that, it's easy to go, well, God, nature's just got it locked down. It's so beautiful and harmonized, and they, are a little bit more activated. They're more activated in the abilities that we have that are more latent and like kind of squashed. So they're more telepathic, and they can sense things and see things that we can't. But that's because they have like a limited experience, and they need that. And there's a beauty to it because so it's beautiful all the way up and down. But to me, I think it's like also lessons based. Like once you get enough of the lessons as a 2D being, like you then there's an evolution that's a slow evolution that you kind of start striving for. Is there more than this? Is there?
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of like pets that we have are around humans so much. They start to pick up on like, there's something else in this reality. These humans are doing these weird things. I'm starting to understand patterns here. And that seems to be like, I've had animals that are like, oh, you're going to be a human next lifetime because you're just like, you're acting like a human now. I've had you for 20 years and you've developed so much into this, like you feel like a kid human, and I think that's also, it's just like at certain points, individual consciousness is evolving and will start to jump into higher awareness. And it's very difficult, but then, a lot of the Eastern stuff talks about like the idea that you reincarnate in order. I think there is a truth to that just because like once you get all the lessons as a 2D, you then go to the next one. And that's what we're doing now as 3D humans starting to go, I'm kind of done with like a lot of this is feeling like repeated cycles. Like, is there something more? And that's, I think, moving into a fourth density reality, like knowing that there is something coming or that there's something more. That's definitely like you go in order like that. But I think also some of the Eastern stuff talks about like punishment and karma. If you have like bad karma and you like are really a tyrant in life, your next incarnation is going to be a rock for your,
you got to start over.
Yeah.
You did it bad.
And I don't know if that is completely true either. I mean, I don't know if I resonate with it. Can't take a side on that, but it seems to me like in this fourth density idea of existence being malleable, like non-physical and ethereal, that it's kind of a choice, and it depends on how much you can focus your consciousness into physicality or how much you can remove your consciousness from physicality. That at a certain point, like once you get out of time and it really is a virtual world, depending on your ability, you can choose to temporarily move your consciousness and kind of walk into a plant's consciousness and be there for a moment to observe something and feel something and then get out. But I do think it takes a lot of energy to do that. If you're a wider density being, to like oscillate your energy down into a heavy place, like it takes a lot of energy to do that. And I think that's why like cryptids and things struggle to stay physical. They're kind of here for a moment and then they disappear, and you can't shoot them with a gun because they're not totally physical. And I think that it's those frequencies. It's like, this is a dense place. It's hard to, if you're an etheric built being, like in fourth density, to actually be in a body and hold that. As far as I understand, is like actually it's hard. It takes a lot of energy to do that, and that's why it is temporary most of the time. But I think the Earth is moving itself into a fourth density, and that veil is becoming thinner, and that's why we're seeing a lot more activity that is paranormal, because it is easier to hold the frequencies in the density.
Yeah.
It was a long rant, but I don't forget what the original point was. But
well, like you were first talking about how they, some Eastern traditions believe that it's a punitive thing or whatever. And that's all just like, I don't know. I'm not like a follower of Eastern religions, and this email, and then I responded was just like, yeah, I think a lot of Eastern religions believe that. I just hadn't really thought about it before. I've joked about like, I hope that from here I get to be a cat, because look at that cute little fucking, like, their life is so fucking sick. And I do think that cats are just like cars for aliens. I just think of all the animals that there's just aliens just hop into cats and like your guides. That's how they follow you around or whatever and see what's up. And that's why they spend most of the time sleeping, because there's no alien in there right now. But it's all just fun stuff to think about and play with. But I thought that and who cares? It like has no bearing on day-to-day life. But I thought the conversation was interesting because I did respond, and then their response was like, like, I'm curious why you think that, because animals are so much more in balance with nature and humans are fucking things up and whatever. And so that part brings me back to this moralistic, like, we're really having a hard time like transcending this idea that the universe or that this game is moral in any way, meaning like that it has a moralistic agenda. It doesn't. Like that there's good guys and bad guys. There just isn't. I get the fucking service to self and service to others, but even in that, the game offers an option of service to self and service to others. Yeah, and the reason for that is because it's a fucking polarity and it has to exist. I, as an individual, get to decide how I want to show up. And to be honest, I didn't show up very moral in most of my life. Like, my integrity has developed and grown as I've grown and healed as a person. That's very STS, not saying I'm not now, but like extremely like without even knowing it, just like subconsciously main character syndrome, thinking everyone in the world exists to perceive me or whatever the fuck, and none of that, like, that is just an experience. Like, the thing is trying to have an experience. And just because, like, even if we do believe, which I don't know what I believe, but even if we do believe that humans are a further in the evolution, which actually does make sense to me. I remember having a conversation with my podcast partner about, like, when we were first starting out with the podcast and touring, we were doing these little tiny venues. And we were having a conversation about being, like, blowing up. And I was like, I actually would not like to blow up fast, because these tiny venues mean a lot to us right now because we sold out a tiny venue. And then when we get to medium-sized venue, as if I was ever going to stick to comedy long enough to experience this, but we get to a medium-sized venue, that's exciting. If we blow up and we're doing stadiums overnight, nothing, like, that's it. You've reached it's not exciting. And it's exactly the experience you have with the band, right? Like, I don't want to go straight to the most extreme thing because it's going to make the smaller things boring. So when I think of reality as a video game and I think about, I want to experience everything the game has to offer, I don't want to come in as a human and then come back as a rock. I mean, that would feel like prison to me, because I've experienced the agency and the complexity of options that comes with being a human that I'm not going to experience if I'm a blade of grass,
And it's like, if you think of it as a school thing, it really doesn't make sense to, like, you graduate high school and then, or let's say you graduate high school and you go to college and you start fucking up really bad and you're failing every year and you keep having to repeat it. That then it's like, the principal of the college or whatever comes in and is like, hey man, you've been doing really bad. You got to go back to third grade. Actually, it's like, doesn't equate. It doesn't make sense. You would just go, no, I'm going to just move on.
Right. And so the question is, why, like, the question is, I guess, and it's also very Western, right, is if the animals are living more in tune with nature, then how are they not further evolved? And this is because that's making it into that's an assumption that there's a good version of, like, higher consciousness means more options. It doesn't mean more moral. And it doesn't mean necessarily more balance. And this has been something that I struggle with. It actually came to me in a trip where I was doing a trip with someone, and all these memories from Atlantis came back, that I didn't even know I was in Atlantis, but someone was doing it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I remembered being left in Atlantis. And then someone who was there in the trip with me that day was someone who left me in Atlantis. And I sat there in silence for probably 15 minutes, just laughing, because we were higher consciousness at that point. And still someone selfishly did something shitty to me to benefit themselves. And at that point, I started laughing because I was like, oh, this shit still exists in higher, what I would now say density.
Yeah.
And it came into focus and I realized like, oh, these opportunities of ways of being don't go away. They are just easier to transcend, but everyone doesn't choose to transcend them. And then the conversation around like that we've had on this podcast about like service to self, service to others, I'm still working through that glitch because for me personally, the higher in consciousness I go, the less it makes sense to be self-serving, the less it makes sense to be that main character syndrome of like exploiting other people to benefit myself. It just doesn't make sense when you have all the tools in the toolbox that come from raising consciousness, but there are other ways of heightening in consciousness that I'm not familiar with in which it serves, i.e. the CIA learning about remote viewing or whatever. And so it's not my personal experience. So I do tend to moralize it.
Right.
And that's been something I've had to go like, okay, I don't have, other than like early awakening where aliens were teaching me, you know, things you could do that I tried out doing selfishly. You know, I tried out manifesting, getting people to do what I want them to do or whatever. And what I learned was like, there is an instant fucking, not an instant, but not nice a pendulum you create every time you exploit. Like,
yeah, what you put out kind of comes back.
Yeah, like if you do a love spell, which I think is the darkest of the darkest magics, like if you do a love spell, yeah, you're going to get some gnarly fucking pendulum in that, you know? The person's going to fall in love with you and then become a stalker or, you know, there's just something comes back to you. And so when you exploit other people, you're fucking swimming upstream of like what some might call karma, I would more neutrally call like a pendulum. And so that's also part of the reason that I'm like this concentrated power thing where they're clearly using magic and stuff. We're going to watch the pendulum come back and hit them like a wrecking ball within their lifetime. Within our lifetime, I just know it because I know how that energy works. It's like a slingshot. You're pulling it back and you might be getting stuff while you're pulling it back, but that rock is coming for your face. And not because it's moral, but it's just how energy works. And so, sorry, I didn't even have a fucking huge rant, but I understand the moralizing and going, well, maybe animals are further along because they are living more in balance with nature. But part of the reason they're living more in balance with nature is because they don't have the option not to.
Yes. Yeah.
It's more options is higher consciousness. You're not automatically going to pick moral options if that's not who you are or what you're capable of, I guess.
And more options is always comes with like a massive learning curve that
right.
can feel depressing, can feel limited, and can feel like I don't know what I'm doing. It's like the thing for people to say, it's like trying to give keys to a car to a 5-year-old. They're going to get in that car and like they're going to run into something really quickly because they have to learn how to use the car.
Yeah.
And so in that process of transition, it's easy to like look around and see other, you know, seeing nature be so amazingly balanced and like harmony and be like, oh, that's just way better. But it's like, no, we're in the process of learning how to use a wider awareness and it's chaos. And like, that's what we're trying to do right now is like decondition and learn how to think out of linear time, which is, it's so difficult, man. I mean, everything in the reality, I think about this all the time, I think I've said this before, but like been lucky enough to like live a lot of my life not having to look at a calendar or a clock. And even that, like there's a lot of times like I don't know what day it is, what time it is. I have to like look at the clock, but even not needing to go to like a day job where I'm like really on the calendar and clock, like counting down the time until my job's over or lunch break. It's still really difficult to not adhere to that linear time because we got to pick up the kids at 6 or we got to go somewhere. And, you know, it's that all of those things like lock you into linear thinking. So to be able to eject out of that is always, it's so difficult. But I love this metaphor. The video game metaphor is always like so helpful to come back to because to understand, like try to understand nonlinear time and like what the virtual aspect may be of the game. And I think heard somebody describing the other day just the Mario Kart being this, you see Mario or whoever you've picked like in the car in front of you and it's stationary there, but then you start driving it and like the world is moving around really. But if you didn't catch that, you would just be playing, you're like, oh, I'm moving through the reality and I'm turning left and going around like the track. And so you navigate a whole world and you run into other characters and stuff, but really like on the screen, like Mario's just in the center. He hasn't moved at all. But it looks like time is moving by and he's moving in the space. And that's the kind of thing that like thinking of that as like what the reality is right now. Like the screen is like just coming through my eyes. And so wherever I look is the center. So, and I'm still really like, I'm having the visceral experience of time and all of that. But like when you can really, it's difficult, but like when you can meditate or tune into that oneness where there is no end or anything, it is like, this is just virtual. And so everything I'm doing in here is like, I'm conceiving as passing time, but it really isn't.
Right.
And I think that's kind of starting to peer into what a fourth density reality is seeing that this is all just the idea of moving time and experience. And from that perspective, I do resonate with it being a school, some advanced thing that like a being or a group of beings or the one created as an imagination, like a very advanced imaginal realm to go into, to learn the experiences of life in whatever way that is. You can choose the STS path and go that whole direction because it has to exist in the imagination. From the person or the thing that created the game, is that good or bad? No, it's just an experience. When you're in it, it can feel you can be very like pulled into the morality of it because the ones that are on the STS path make it really difficult and hard for other people.
Yeah.
But that all from the lesson standpoint, like if you can make it through that gauntlet of negativity or tension and resistance, it's actually like a beautiful learning experience. And so, especially with the singularity thing ideas coming up where we're getting to that point where technology is so advanced, like we're creating virtual worlds already within video games and the way AI is now like being able to mimic reality so well. It seems like not long from now, there's already video games that have been made that are apparently like infinite worlds you can explore. You can go to different planets, and it's open source, so it just keeps going. And so there are video games that you could like never have enough time to explore every inch of it. And how quickly are we going to be to a point where somebody creates a game just like the one we're in, essentially? Right. And that thinking that we're like on that cusp, and you can see that and feel it in the reality that when those two things, like when that happens, it is a singularity, and then you have to realize that's what we're in right now. Like,
right.
And it all is a visceral learning experience that like, I think is what also from certain things that I've read, like beings that are not embodied in physical form do have they're drawn to physicality because it is such a visceral experience and there's so much to learn, and you experience like reality, kind of the illusion of reality happening to you instead of you having to build the world and make choices. And that I could see from a different perspective would be like fun when I'm feeling, bored with this reality. Oftentimes I like to go play a video game because it's like I can go into a different world and I can like deal with the rules that are in that game, and it's like a limited experience and I can get lost.
But it's always like limited. Like that was the thing that like bores me about video games is like, I don't know, because I engage with reality like it's a video game, but there's so much limitation just to prove that we like limitation.
Yes.
Like we seek it out as sport.
Yeah. And so in this reality, I mean, there is limitation, but it's like so infinite. Like with those dimensions being lateral, there's infinite of them. And so it's such a great video game because you kind of can like choose so many different experiences, but from the perspective of a higher awareness, it all is limited. It's just this game, but it's so advanced that like you do have the ability to control the reality if you can control your mind, which is the core part of your soul that, you know, I think it's taxing to be in the physical body, but like when you start to realize and we start to widen our awareness, you realize like, oh, when I control my emotions and my thoughts, my reality really does shift and change. And that's all lessons to learn to then get into this wider awareness where I do believe fourth density is like you choose to see and be what you want. And you have to learn how to get the keys to the car to do that. That's not an easy process because right now it's like I feel like I'm in pretty good control over my consciousness and emotions. But with this Aries energy, I'm like so focused on the kids leaving a mess and I circle on it all day that I'm like, now I can't control my reality and I'm just negative energy and I can't even read a book or think about like how beautiful everything is. I'm just stuck in the thing because this external thing in my reality like took control over my emotions. And I think that's all it's from that macro place. I get it. It's like, it's amazing, beautiful thing, the Matrix. It's like incredible technology that is visceral and real, and you can get stuck in it for a long time, but there is no time from that other place, so it's not really time, but you get caught in the game, you know, just like sometimes I'm playing a game, I do get pulled in and I'm like addicted and I just want to keep going and I forget that I'm like, oh, it's midnight, I should go to bed and come back, you know?
Yeah. We were going to talk about the Matrix mother thing. I have to go to the bathroom and get some hot beverage.
Cool.
We'll come back.
Pee break. Now, listen to our elevator band. Hit it, boys. That was great, boys. Thank you. That was a really good one. Is that a new one you have?
Dude, imagine if elevator music was just a band. There was a band in every elevator. You could only fit 2 people in a suitcase on the elevator because I think I've seen band.
Somebody do a skit like that, like where they just take over an elevator and there's a little band in there. And the random people get in and they're like, what? Yeah, so just one thing to add to that rant I was talking about, kind of about virtual reality in the Matrix. Mateus DeStefano's somebody that we listen to often. I really like his viewpoint on a lot of things. And I was listening to a thing the other day where he was talking about a lot of people's desire to think of the Matrix as negative and escape it, because a lot of this awakening process is realizing how much manipulation and kind of control is within it. And from this idea of people thinking that it is a trap, like we're in a jail in the Matrix, and like the point is to break out of the Matrix and escape and be free, can create a lot of like pessimistic views on the beauty of the game. And I do believe, like from the thing that I was talking about, our ancestors or us on a higher level decided to create this thing.
Right.
At a similar point that we are at now, where the singularity is upon us and we like are starting to create something, that at some point there was much more balance, and we decided to create this beautiful thing that was physical, experiential. You get so lost in it that you can spend so much time in it, and then there's so many lessons. So there's beauty. And even at that level, I think there is a harmonization with polarity, as like seeing the STO or the negative kind of energy and the positive energy, that they are in harmonization. They're in more balance. And that's what makes the game. And so at that higher level, you're not like a victim to the negativity. You see the purpose of it. Just like I always say in art, like tension is what makes really great art. So having a dark experience and being able to transmute that into a beautiful song there's purpose in the darkness there. And so like that, there's that polarity is like, there's something to it, that it sparks life. And so Mateus's viewpoint is that the matrix, it is, the term comes, like it is essentially translates to the mother. And he used the metaphor of a baby being birthed out of its mother, is that when the baby comes out, if it has the chance to, not via Western medicine where they take the baby away right away, but in the natural process, the baby comes out and immediately clings to the mother because it doesn't feel safe. It's a natural thing, and it immediately finds the breast and feeds and then is nurtured by the mom until it has the ability to start to be away from the mom. And then as the child develops is kind of usually where the father figure comes in play, is to help guide them and teach them about the world, what's dangerous, what's safe, how to be. And so it was equating that like the desire to escape the matrix in a negative way would be awakening and kind of coming into this other dimension of awareness, which we would call fourth density, and immediately wanting to get the keys to the Corvette and like go out and abandon the mother and look at it as negative. And so the thing he's trying to say is that it's important to see the beauty of the mother, of the matrix, and the purpose of it. And as we do exit the matrix, is to turn around and be in awe and honor the matrix as the mother that birthed you out and gave you the experiences you needed to grow and now be on your own. And that's so beautiful, because I think that is like, I experience it that at times, that I'm like, there are times where I'm in resistance to reality and like hate the dictators controlling everything and all the negativity and the pain and the suffering. It's like brutal. But there's certain states where I'm kind of just like, God, it's so beautiful though, the whole thing. And it's hard to hold those because there is so much pain and suffering. But in those moments, I am like thankful for it all. And I think that as we like move in and learn how to exit it, is to turn around and honor it and still use it to, understand where we're going. And then he equated the father as like this higher macro sense. You come out of the mother, and then the father equates to like patterns and geometry. And that's what helps you understand how to move through the fourth density, is knowing patterns, how to recognize patterns, and the geometry is the fractal nature of everything. Interesting. And so that is your guide to navigating other realms. And that makes so much sense to me. I mean, I like have dove into, I've had times where I'm like really obsessed with sacred geometry and like seeing the patterns in the nature, how everything's fractal and everything is like kind of plugged into each other. And it things that are built out of that sacred geometry are like almost indestructible. Like they are so harmonized that they create the patterns of the matrix. And so they work together. But I really like the way he distilled that. And it does, you see it a lot. It's like in the conspiracy theories, like the matrix is a trap. It's a soul trap. We need to get out of here. The controllers are controlling us. When reality, like in these six density channelings of like soul conscious or like group soul consciousness, they're very clearly stating that it's like, no, the dark and the light work together, dog. It's like, from your experience, yes, we understand it's like hard and you want to find a enemy and like get rid of them, but like you can't. It's the nature of physicality. It's a reflection of yourself, yeah. And it's funny to think about like, the mother birthed you and nurtures you, and then you blame the matrix, because we do talk shit about the matrix a lot. And then I think of what it's like to raise teenagers who are, biologically, it's important for them to start to reject your logic because it's what helps them get out on their own. Yeah. But as a mother, it's real fun to give someone life and then nurture them and take care of them just for them to think they've got it all figured out. I mean, I'd be like, what, there's a problem.
that mother.
Totally.
She's the
the one that brought me into this world.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. Sometimes it is the mother's. But, yeah, that's funny. Our relationship with it is very similar to that. I remember I did an episode, I think the second episode of AOD was called A Tour of the Matrix. And in part of the intro, I'm reading the definition of Matrix and it said mother. And I was like, fuck, that's creepy. But now it makes a lot more sense. A womb. I find the longer I'm conscious and the more the more zoomed out I get, the more I'm like, a lot of the things that I attributed. I used to say I hated Earth. Like that was like very much my perspective for a long time.
Well, one thing I was going to say, just as a caveat, just a rabbit hole people might want to go down, and maybe some people have deduced with what I just said about the matrix being the mother and pattern and geometry being the father. The entire reality being like patriarchal and very much a lot of religions, it's like Father God, and that's what we need to focus on. It's created this upside down pattern recognition where we're all looking for Father to save us and Father God, and it's this male figure in the sky. It's inverted, and so that's what's created the hatred towards women and ultimately the matrix, the mother that we're in. And when you have that orientation, you can't get out. Like that's what fucks you up. And so that's a rabbit hole to go down. That's like endless and very controversial and very hard to discern. But when you start to see it that way, I'm like, oh my God, everything, like so many religions are oriented towards male dominance, and it's upside down. It's just like, it really isn't what the beauty is. Like the beauty is in this feminine creative force that is the matrix and is this whole thing. Male energy has a place and it's a very powerful thing, but seeing it as like pattern and geometry just makes sense. And that's like the guide to understanding. But without that feminine part and that balance, you got a bunch of beings trying to exit the matrix that are like tyrants trying to move through a world that with no creative spark and no ability to like create their own worlds. They create fucking wild fourth dimensional worlds. And maybe not even fourth dimensional. Some of them are 3-dimensional, but yeah. Anyway, that's a rabbit hole just to spark your thought and go down, because that's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious. The patriarchy is inverted. I'm running out of steam, but there was one last thing that feels like it's on this thread to just kind of throw out. But I do believe, and maybe this is a mechanism of fourth density, this was fucking all over at one point, and now I can't find it anywhere because people have been like, where does that come from? And then I'm like, now I can't find it anywhere. But maybe I jumped timelines. Something about the bargain ending in human design was like the bargain with animals was also ending. And I'll do some more research and I see if I can find more on it. But that felt very true to me. But I feel like I see it every day. So it does seem as if animals are moving up in agency, like the amount of agency that's been available to them in the, last, I'm just going to say 400 years, right? But maybe for this whole game is like leveling up as well. And so I'm seeing a lot of, if the way that you're hosting a domesticated animal is not in alignment with that animal, like the increases of like animals attacking, even like the idea of like ownership is weird, right? But we're starting to move out of that and saying like pet parent or host or whatever. But it may become impossible to keep animals and use them for food. I think how I think factory farming is going to go out is it's going to start poisoning people.
Yeah, it already has.
It already is, but it's going to be like disease. Objectively, it's going to be like just more salmonella outbreaks. Right? It's just going to make it. It's going to become impossible. But I also think like the relationship to domesticated animals is about to shift drastically. I think animals are going to step into a much higher form of agency. And that higher form of agency is going to make a lot of sense to humans that are kind of integrating with fourth density easily. But I think humans that are still like maybe not aware that they're being pushed into fourth density, but they're still operating from this domination way of being, are going to start getting really hurt by animals. And examples of this is like, you know, you already see animals fucking people up in the ocean now. Like we're like, yeah, we're going to stay on the ocean.
Dude, I love the ocean so much, but every time I'm in it, I'm like heightened awareness. Like what is going to come attack me?
Yeah.
I mean, it's always,
dogs are attacking their owners, quote unquote owners, you know, a lot is shifting. I think that nature will actually, the balance between humans, to go back to that message about like humans being out of balance with nature, that's not like innately the human condition. Like that's not what it was before the West, right? The current being so out of balance with nature, I believe, and the West dominating, I believe, is a mechanism of the ajna, the mind running the world for a while. And so like the colonization, everything was an expression of that. And so as that falls away and we become like emotionally driven beings, we will come into balance with nature, and then nature will really kind of step into its power. And so I think that is going to be a great humbling to the humans that haven't started to come into balance with nature, which thank God for you, because I don't know that I was out there dominating nature, but I sure as fuck didn't understand it. What I say the other day, I was like, oh my God, do you think like the trees create more leaves in the summer when the sun is really hot, and then it gives us and the animals like shade? And you were like, yeah. I was like, this all works together. I just couldn't see it. I was too traumatized. But
no, I think that's all true. The way I understand this fourth density aspect happening, it's the cyclical nature, and at times the Earth hasn't been ready to move up into fourth density, or maybe it has, but it's hard to know in the historical records. Like if there was a jump, I think there's a lot of theories that it has, but whatever it is, the cycle's happening. So it's happening to individuals if your frequency of vibration is there, but it's also happening to the Earth. And so when you think about nature being harmonized always with whatever the Earth is, nature is going too. You know, like it is, especially nature that has the freedom to roam and just be in harmony. And you can see it on TikTok and stuff. Like there's crazy things being captured that animals are doing. They're intermingling. Like I saw the other day, there was like a dog, a husky that like got away from its owners, and they lost it. In like weeks it was lost, and then they found it roaming with a pack of bears. Like fucking, it was a dog, like a house dog, and it was just like frolicking with the bears. They're playing. I've seen a fox and a badger like being captured on like night cams that were like hunting cams, and they're just hanging out. Like it's like Disney. They're just like little buddies. You see the consciousness of animals like elevating. And yeah, I think that I could see scenarios playing out where the dominance of humans with animals is going to start to balance itself out in kind of a gnarly way.
Yeah.
But you also on the flip side see, you know, people that are in resonance with animals and are harmonizing, like the things that are happening, the connections that are happening are like psychically, they're able to communicate. There's like really nuanced understanding between the animal and the human. Or, you know, I've talked to certain people in sessions that have like, they're just very connected to nature, and they'll tell me all the time, like a fox came up and at their house and like had like babies and like stayed with them, and was like very like, would come up and they could feed them with their hands. It like trusted the humans. Yeah. And so we're starting to harmonize, like people's places are becoming these like Disney jungles with animals showing up and providing synchronistic messages and hanging out, like deers coming into houses to eat, going back out into the wild. Like so there's so many different opportunities. But yeah, the people that around here I see every now and then, somebody that's got their dog chained up to a tree outside, and it's a huge like mastiff. I'm like, days are coming. That mastiff's going to break that chain and like maul all of you. You know? So
I don't think the animals are just going to. I just think when that 3420 of the cross of the cross of sleeping phoenix really hits, there is an enormous amount of power that's just kind of hitting the realm.
Yeah.
And it's personal. I was researching it today because it's coming. It's the next class. And it is personal power in the present moment. And it is like not a dominating power at all. And so you wouldn't be hurt by that, someone else being in that power, unless you infringed on their power. Mm-hmm. And just coming from this culture, speaking of Western culture, of dominance and of infringing and of stepping into other people's auras to manipulate or dominate them in any way, you're going to be met with like the rawest, most powerful fucking like pushback. And that's what I think we're going to see. That's also going to be the exact thing I think that like tears down a lot of the, concentrations of power, is the way that power has been being concentrated. As people start to be influenced by this 3420, which I have natally, it is not going to work out for you. It's like that Mastiff isn't going to go out and, attack a person who's just walking down the street, but you don't want to be the person that tied up the Mastiff.
Exactly.
And you're the Mastiff. Like you as an individual are going to step into your own power. You're going to be conditioned to do that the way that you've been conditioned to fawn before. And whoever is trying to exploit you it's not going to work out very well for them.
It gives me chills, man. And that's something the Seas talk about. The Cassiopeians are like, they've said cryptically for a long time, there's going to come a point where the playing field is leveled.
Yeah.
And they always ask, like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And they kind of like over time have given more cryptic answers to what that means. And what they have deduced, and what I can deduce from it too, is that with this fourth density and the frequency elevating, with the sun doing things, electromagnetic field, where the experience of the change is kind of chaos, earthquakes, crazy weather, volcanoes. But then once this kind of new grid comes online, the deception and manipulation doesn't work anymore. Those power structures that have been able to benefit off of deception and manipulation, we can see it now. And beings also then, spiritual abilities, these latent abilities that I think we're all subtly working on, even if we don't know, but a lot of people are trying to work on them through meditation, through, gateway tapes, through all these things. Once the grid comes online, those things are going to be very much easier to get into, and the playing field is leveled. And to me, that is like, just all of the like evil shit and control being balanced out by nature itself, which is always such a like powerful energy that is not doing things to harm and hurt through some kind of control thing. It's balance and it's raw force. It gives me chills because I just think that's like what there's like that passion inside of me that like won't die. There's times where it feels like when it's necessary, like that comes online, and there is just there's like a part of my energy that is just like loudly that I feel is like a force that will push something away. And nature doing that, beings coming online and being able to hold that raw power is like completely unstoppable. It makes the corruption and the manipulation, what the billionaires are doing, just like little kids in a sandbox trying to fucking fight the big lion. It's just like, oh man, you have nothing to stand on once this thing kicks on. It's so rad and inspiring.
I love it. All right, Mark has sessions. I maybe have sessions. I don't know.
I've got a lot of sessions. This week I'm off because I'm doing some music stuff. But yes, I've got more openings next week and beyond.
2027 course. I don't know. I think you can sign up for one more week or something, and then you can get it cheaper after it's over. Love you. Bye.
Bye.